some different choices that you have in using pots in your grow area. Now, before you decide what pot to use, you need to ask yourself a couple questions. Number one, how much time do you want to spend in your grow area? If you want to go in there every day and nurture and care for your plants, you're going to want maybe a pot like this fat sack here, which is going to drain very well, so you need to water your plants more often. If you don't want to mess with your garden lots, you want to go in there once a week or so, then maybe a plastic pot would be a better choice because they're going to drain less, they're going to hold the moisture in better, and you're going to need to water your plants less. Number two, what type of plants are you going to grow in your grow area? If you're going to grow very small plants, then you can use smaller containers or pots. If you're going to have plants that are going to flower or fruit, then you're going to want a larger container because when plants go through this flowering phase and fruiting phase, they need more root growth and root space. Now, another thing you need to understand is that every single pot is going to need to drain. You do not want your soil to be soaking wet all the time. The reason is, and again, you can see this is a bad thing. This has been in standing water, and when I push on this, some water comes out. When your soil is soaking wet like this, it's going to promote root rot. Your roots are going to rot. No oxygen is going to get in here. That could kill or at least harm your plant. And the other thing is that when it's always wet like this, that's going to promote fungal growth, and things like damping off can occur, which can also harm or it can kill your plants outright. So never let your plants stand in standing water like this. Make sure they drain and let it dry out for a few days. Let's talk about some different options for pots. Now this pot is a coir pot, and these are made up of coconut husks. So the nice thing about this is they're made up of a renewable resource. This is a sustainable way to grow. These are also nice because they allow good drainage, which means they can allow oxygen in here. Oxygen is just as important as water for your roots. Now the downside to these is that since they allow oxygen in, they do tend to drain very well, and so they tend to dry out quickly. And so what I've done when I first used these, I let them soak in water so the pot is totally saturated with water. Then I put the soil in here. You just have to keep an eye on these to make sure that they don't dry out. So I'll start plants like this indoors, and if I want to put them outdoors, I can just put this whole pot right in the ground like this, and since this will break down over time, and you don't have to worry about digging it up or harming the environment. So these are nice, they are sustainable, renewable, they drain well, allow great oxygen in. The only thing is you have to keep an eye because since they allow so much oxygen in, they may also let the soil dry out quicker than some other pots. What I have here in this container is, these are called grow bags. Now these are inexpensive, they're very easy to use. I use these every spring. What I do is I'll start plants indoors and I'll put them in these grow bags. And then when I go to take them outside, you just take a knife or scissors, you can even just rip these. You rip the bag like this and you do not harm the roots at all, so they're great for transplanting. One downside is since they are made of thin plastic, they can be a little wobbly. It's not a big deal. You'll notice that they're white on the outside and black on the inside. This white is good, it reflects light, so that helps indoor growth. And the black is going to prevent light from coming through. You don't want your containers or your pots to let light through because then algae can grow in with your roots and that is steal nutrients and can harm your plants. So the grow bags are an inexpensive, easy way to grow some plants, and they are great for transplanting outside because you can just rip the bag and you don't harm the roots at all. What I have here, these are plastic nursery pots. These are tried and true and tested pots. I've used these for decades. Every single greenhouse I've ever worked in has used these plastic pots at some point or another. Now, they're nice because they come in variable sizes. You can grow almost any type of plant. They stack inside of each other, so they're very easy for storage. Now, one thing you need to be aware of is that since they're plastic, then no oxygen can get through these, which means the only way that your roots are going to get oxygen is through the top or through these little tiny holes down here. So you don't want to overwater your plants when they're in these plastic pots, and you never want to let these pots with plants in them sit in standing water because that can promote root rot. So these are sturdy, inexpensive, great pots to use. The only thing you have to be careful of is you don't want to overwater these because the only way oxygen can get in is through the bottoms and the top here. So these are plastic nursery pots. What I have here is the newest in new. This is called the Oxy Pot. Now, I'm sure you're wondering why it has this freaky porcupine-like shape. Well, what these are tiny little holes. And so that's great. It's called the Oxy Pot. It allows oxygen in. Oxygen is just as important as water for your roots. So this allows oxygen in, allows great drainage. Now this is plastic, it's a very sturdy pot, but unlike regular nursery pots, the roots aren't just going to go around and around in here. They're going to grow out these little holes. And so that's going to promote lots of good fibrous root growth. Once the roots come out here, they're going to die off. That's called air pruning. That's good. Again, this promotes lots of good fibrous root growth. Now, another great thing about this is that once you're going to transplant your plants, sometimes when you're going to transplant your plants, they get damaged when you're moving them out. Now, this does have some assembly required. It takes less than a minute. Just put a few plastic screws in here. I'm going to take the last one out. And so when you go to transplant your plants, you just take the screws out and ta-da! You open this up, no root damage at all. You just pick your plant up and transplant it into the next pot or outdoors, whatever you're going to do. So this is the Oxy Pot. It's a new type of technology pot. It allows oxygen in, promotes great fibrous root growth. Good growing.